All right, we are back with SEO SQL pattern number 2. Today is all about the time dimension of our analysis. But before we get started, I want to say thank you for being so patient with me. If you watched my last video, it probably looked like I was a sleepless zombie. It's because I am. We have an infant at home, so bear with me. I think I'm going to do a lot better today. And so I guess without any more caveats, let's get into the actual content today. So today is all about SQL patterns related to time. And the way I think about it, there are 4 different patterns, and you probably hear them all the time, but you don't really think of them as patterns. But you would hear people say things like, how did we perform in January? Or how did we perform in the last 7 days? Or how did we perform in the last 7 days versus the previous 7 days? Or how are we performing over time? And so you hear those every day, or you hear them frequently, but you probably don't associate them with the terminology that describes the pattern. So the first one, how did we do in January, is an absolute time frame, meaning it has a beginning and an end, and it's not going to shift or change. It's just that time frame. The second is a relative time frame. So the last 7 days is relative to today. So how do we go back 7 days and up to today? That's a relative time frame. A comparison is take 1 month or last 7 days, 2 time frames, and compare them against each other. And how are we performing over time is what I call compare an across time analysis. There's probably a better word for that, but that's what I'm going with. And so if we think about this from the perspective of SQL, 3 of these have to do with filtering, and 2 of them have to do with grouping. So absolute and relative time ranges are just ranges of time that we're going to think about how we filter these things. And then comparisons, obviously, we're going to filter in the 2 time periods, and then we are going to group them too. And then across time, you're just thinking about how are we going to group the different segments of time so that you can look at multiple segments at a time. And so I put these dots over here just to show how simple or complex they are. The first 2 are really easy just because they're simple filters on any type of query that you would put on. And then the third, comparisons, are the most complex, and I'll get into why, and I'll show, if you're new to SQL, I'll introduce something called a common table expression. I think we did that in the last video too, but it'll just be good for some reiteration. And then doing analyzing data across time is somewhere in between. So those are the 4 patterns, and now we can get into actually writing SQL to see how we would actually do these types of analyses. And I guess before we start doing that, I should note that this is an important piece of keeping your costs down. So you always want to put a date filter on the data so that, on your query, so that Google BigQuery doesn't have to scan all the rows of data just to produce the results that you want. If you only care about the last 2 months, filter it in the last 2 months so that you don't waste a bunch of compute spend on months that aren't part of the analysis. So again, or rather, here we go. Let's get into the SQL that's associated with it all. So the first one that I don't have up here is date filters, and I can make this a little bit bigger, really obnoxiously big. Get my face out of here. Great. So the first one is an absolute date range. So I like to use date trunc. Date trunc will allow you to truncate any date by the quarter, year, month. Not sure if it does week, probably does week. We could find out if I do. It runs, so I don't know what this is going to produce. But anyways, so what this is doing here is I'm summing up clicks and impressions, and I'm filtering them by the month, where the month equals the string value 2024-12-01. So that's the year's 2024. The month is 12 and the day is 1. That is the common string expression for any time you're going to refer to a date as a string literal. And so if I were to change it to, say, 11, then I can see last November, and I can just look at one segment of time at a time. Now that's an absolute one because I'm saying this, the way that this, it's filtering only the days, and we can show you how this works. Data group by. So you can see is that it's filtering only the dates in the month of December. That's all we care about, because what it's doing is it's translating the data date into a value. Actually, I can show it more clearly. This is what it looks like. So each one of these is getting transformed with that date trunc function into the first date of the month. So let's get rid of those and this. Now, actually, maybe it might be helpful to keep those. And then we'll do, instead of that, instead of an absolute date range, we'll try it with a relative date range. So what I'm doing here is where the data date is greater than the current date minus 28. And so when you are comparing dates, like in this case, this produces a date, and I'll show you what this looks like. The function that produces the current date of the current time. And so let's see. So I have the current date minus 28. So today's date is February 1st. I'm going to subtract 28 days from that. And let's just see what it looks like. So I got the data date, which I just showed in the last query, and goes from, it looks about right, except for a couple of things. Well, first, let's go. This one is the date trunc, the result of the date trunc function. This is the result of the current date function, and this is the value of the data date. Now, what you'll notice here is there's only 26 rows in the result, and that's because of queries. Google Search Console connector integration with BigQuery has some latency, right? So as we can see, the most recent date is the 30th, so that was 2 days ago. So what we need to do here is subtract 2 from data date. So we'll get a 28-day time frame, but we'll offset it by putting a little buffer on either side of these so that we subtract from both sides. See what we got. We have 26 rows still. Let's see, why am I getting 26 rows? Because all right, so here's the deal. I have the data date is greater than the current date minus 28, but we actually want to do something like minus 2. We can offset on that side. Okay, promises can be right. Good. Just had to think through it a little bit. And this happens. I struggle with dates still. I've been doing this for a long time. I still struggle with it. So we get the results that we want, where 3rd through the 30th makes 28 days. And to do that, we had to subtract the current. We wanted all the dates that are greater than the current date, 28, and then we're adding that little offset there. And this is one discrepancy that you'll find frequently whenever you do a query and you want to see, you want to compare it to the Google Search Console UI. Often gets data before this gets data. Latency in both, but there may be latency in getting into BigQuery. So always be mindful of that. So again, there we have absolute time frames using date trunc. We have a relative time frame comparing our current date to all the data date to a date relative to today. So relative time frame. This one goes a little bit easier. Oh my gosh, it's a tough one. This one is about dates over time. Again, this one is a little bit harder. It is not terribly hard. So let's read this and then run it. So I got the select up here all by itself because I'm going to show a few different things here, but I am selecting date trunc again. So using date trunc this time as a header or a dimension rather than a filter, and it's going to evaluate out to the first day of the week. So what I have, the date trunc is pass in the data date, and then this argument is I forget what they call it, but it tells it what you want it truncated to month, week, date. And if you put in, just tells it you want the weeks to start on Monday. So that returns a date value, and then format date is a function that you want to have really nice and clean dates. You can it in all types of different ways. I'll let you explore the docs on that one, but let's run this for now. So show the results first. So here's start is the date trunk value, and week is the formatted date value, where year is 2024, and then I have a little dash, and then I have the week number for the year, and that's the value for that. The other thing I should have mentioned earlier is the filtering that I'm doing here, because remember, I guess it's not really relevant, but filtering that I'm doing here is using a between operator, and that is particularly like using between. It's easier for me to spin a date range by using between rather than using is greater than this and is less than or equal to this. That I always have to think through that a lot more, but if I just use between to create a range, it's nice because between includes the beginning of the range, and it includes the end of the range. So if I have a range from January 1st, January 31st, I include those both in both parts of the expression. And then I know that I will have every day inclusive from the 1st to the 31st. And so what I've done here is I want every day in 2024. So I start on January 1st and end on December 31st. And that's, we see a chart there. It's exactly what it looks like. And boy, oh boy, did I have some great growth in search this year. Okay, cool. So we can change this using the exact same approach where I've got months. I don't know why they use B as the to format it. What that looks like. I guess B gives you the name of the month. I don't ever use this. I use date trunk all the time just because it's easier to remember off my head. That's cool. And then you can of course do quarters too, where nice to roll up data into quarters, where if you compare something like Google Search Console, you have all these wacky little lines. It's to be able to roll up data into cleaner months, quarters, weeks, or whatever. So that's what monthly traffic looks like. It's just so much easier to make sense of, and you would never want to present somebody who's not like an SEO that Google Search Console thing. I mean, nobody actually shouldn't to anybody, because it's just harder to make sense of because there's so much variability on every little day. So that is how we analyze data time. It is using a group by statement to, I should say, look, I'm putting the headers or dimension, and these, and I'm by into, which refers to the first two columns in the very much of an absolute or relative frame, where you're just thinking about values within the scope of time, and across time, where you're segmenting time up and you want to visualize it or think about it over time. So that's 3 patterns down. But here's a really one, because it's such an ugly mess, there's tools out there, and there's everybody wants to see a line that they can kind of discern trends without, there to make sense variability. So what we filtered out there, I've filtered is this something, again, I take every day that is greater than current date minus 52 times 7. 52 times 7 is 52 weeks in a year. So this evaluates 360 something 4. And I should also subtract another, oh my gosh, how do I do this? Order of operations, multiply, subtract. So I guess we could just put on -2 there, and then we should have every day 364, just what I wanted. Holy smokes, that was lucky. I was really lucky. Okay, so that is, did I put them here? Should, good. Okay, that's good. February 2nd of last year all the way to a couple days ago. Lost my head. Okay, we're going now. Where are we now? Oh yeah, this is what I'm showing you. This is super advanced to get into, and it's called a window function. So what it does, I got window functions for both these, is it, let me think through this quick. It does an average of the sum of clicks for each day over a window. And this is called the window clause, and it has two parts. First, start from where it says this is the rows to include window, and so it says rows between 6 and current row. What that means is we're going to come up with, I should have just said, a rolling average for a 7-day rolling average. And so the window is between the current row and the preceding seven rows. So let's go to the 7th day here. And so in the preceding 6 rows. So let's go to the 7th day. And it would include from this row, and would average all the rows, the 7 rows before. That's what it's going to look like when we actually run it. And then the order clause is important because you have to order dates in the order that they happen, or else it's just 7 arbitrary days and roll them up. So the order by for this window clause is really important. And so this is how you rolling average. So let's look at what that looks like. There you go. So like I said, this 7 is an average of all of that row and all the ones that happened before it. And as you can see, as you know, like there's the weekdays, and that's what this does it gets rid of that really nicely. So this is, you're probably, this type with Google, with any type of data. And so we add on our rolling impressions and averages to clean this up and find a nice little pattern where we're seeing an average. Each dot on this line represents an average of all days that happened before it. And what we notice is that you don't have this big wild swing from the quote unquote week, but you have just something that makes it easier to discern the trend in what's happening. And so a lot of times people will get, a bad week because, or be worried, the weekend's here, and then, because of traffic on the wrong day. So this kind of smooths it out. Struggling here. I'm still sleeping, I promise. Okay, so that's the explanation query. We had the interesting filtering, relative date filtering, the rolling averages. So I will share these queries, and you can kind of analyze them and run them yourselves. You can make this a 28-day rolling average, and what this will do is it will 27, so that we don't. If I go 28 days preceding that would be 29-day range. So I'd have to do 27 because it's inclusive of both sides, because I'm using the between operator. So if I ran this, what do you think happened? Think about it. Well, this will probably even smooth out even more because it will be taking the average of 4 weeks of data of 28 days instead of just 1 week. So let's run it, find out what's going to happen. And exactly what it did. So let's do something fun and do 6. And you know what? Let's even go crazy here. Let's do 300. Let's just do 50. Makes it smooth it out even more. Now, I'm not going to say that this is particularly useful, but it just due to what you can do. So we have the really, I should even add the impressions. The really variable daily impressions. We have weekly rolling impressions, which shows, a lot of variable from week to week. And then as we zoom out in our window, gosh, what have I done? That's not what I want. We have these like really smooth things, and we're averaging over the last 50, what was mine there? 55. Why would I do 55? 7 times 8, that's 8 weeks. So averaging over 8 weeks. If you want to know, like, how do we how did the last 8 weeks? This gives you a point in time for every one of those, and it makes it really easy to see that, without a doubt, traffic was really starting to improve in this. I mean, you obviously see any one of these, but like the trend is very, very evident. Of course, there are downsides, because it's think about like what does that lag actually represent. But anyways, that's how you do a rolling average. You could do these could also be sums too. So this would be the sum of the last 7 days, the sum of the last 4 weeks, and the sum of the last 8 weeks. Run it, see what it looks like. That there's all different types of window functions. It's not just rolling averages. And so kind of an interesting way to, I don't know, it's the same thing but different. Okay, we've gone into a lot of we've covered absolute. The first one we did data across time with the when we did the stuff, and then we did it with the rolling averages, and then now we have the big, which is the time comparison. So, and I might, I'm even just going to do this one first. Here's another interesting way to roll up stuff by day of the week. Rather, I'm treating date it's like these represent time, but they're more of just an arbitrary. In this case, they don't represent time because they're not like values aren't ordered over time, aggregated by day of the week. What I'm doing here is I'm using date format again to the number of the week. U represents the number of the week, and the abbreviation for the week. And so it's a little kind of a cool chart that corresponds to the traffic that you get, the amount of traffic that you get on every day of the week. And so you probably recognize this in your own data. Monday, happen to get a lot, especially if you're a business, you get a lot of traffic, kind of decays over the week. Friday, it's half gone, especially if you're in the US, Europe and India and like really populated places. Asia will open on the weekend, and then Sunday, since it's Monday in other parts of the world, it starts to tick up. I'm in the Pacific time zone. That's what's happening here. And then by Monday, everybody's back online and making widgets and doing a lot of important work. Okay, so that's that. To think about here is it's like you can into the seasonality of it. This is a good way to think about seasonality, or we could do this. Let's hope for the best here. That's why. Oh boy. 365, 367. So this should give us seasonality of a month. So, oh my gosh. I'm not even gonna, that's because I have two, it happens there twice, but this is not, my data in my Search Console is a little bit unusual just because it just happens to last year. I guess what we could do is here say 367.65 times means the last 2 years. And oh gosh. All right, forget all that. I'm just going to probably delete all that. But anyways, let's get into the time comparisons. So time comparisons, the way I like to do them, you can do them with case expressions, and if you're doing them that way right now, you do it that way. I like to do them in common table expressions, and a table expression, as we've probably shown before, produces, you can highlight the inside of this query, so and then run it. I've asked for days, and I've done the kind of offsetting thing here. Well, I'm wrong again. Current day is between, no, I've done it right. And actually, let's double check it here. So I should just say, this is how you define a common table expression, and it produces you can see when you run it, and you can then reference that table later. And so what we're going to do is I've created two expressions. I'm going to join them together. But right now, just to get a sense of what we're looking at, I have 28 days of data that are the last impressions data from the last 28 days. And I'm grouping it by, so now we're looking at all the clicks and impressions query on the last 28 days of my site, and all kinds of super random queries. And then I can do the same thing here, where I've offset this by Let's double check that I got it right here. I got 28 are the 28 days prior to the last 28 days, so the previous 28 days. And what I'm going to do is reference both of those common table expressions. So you have the last 28, previous 28. Those are now can reference later in my query here, and I've referenced it as last 28. And then I join to previous 28 on, and I have alias as p, so l.query equals p.query. So I've joined them on the query, the value of query, and I'll limit 10, so a whole bunch. So what this produces is, because I limited by, that is ordered by the total volume for the last 28 days and the previous values. And so what we're doing now is finally comparing the last 28 days against the previous 28 days. So there's all the queries, and they're all here query, and then I have from the P table, which is previous, and then the L table, which is the last. So these columns are the 28 days prior to the last 28 days, and these are from the last 28 days. And then in the last two columns, I'm doing a difference of what that gives us is the top queries in last compared to the metrics in the previous month. That's cool, but something that's a lot more is if we ordered them by, let's say, what queries have changed the most. So these are my top growing queries, all about social media dates. You can guess what type of content's on my site I've been goofing around with. Or you can do it ascending, and then it'll show you what pages on. So these are the ones that are kind of what's happening in the search pages, what's happening on my website, what's happening on competition. But this, I think, is one of the more useful analyses for SEO. I mean, all of these, right? There's just the absolute dates to know how you're performing over time. It's it's put on a certain report and say, hey, this is this network. But a comparison is the thing, because you can have at any moment for any period of time, you can say you can get us what things are doing better, how can we improve on, and how can we leverage that to do better other things, and are our tactics working? Things are getting worse, and so we need to figure out how to fix those things. This is, from a hands SEO perspective, a very helpful report. You can obviously roll it up by country. Let's just do here. Use the URL impressions to roll it up by URL, but you have to be kind of careful about that. Here, some learning is that I tried common table expression, except for it's not there, so I have to put it in both of these, and then I have to join them together down there on those columns. There it is. I've really dropped off in Ethiopia. I'm not sure what it is, or ROU is. Let's look at the other way. If there's anybody still watching this video, my gosh, we're almost done. Oh, there's USA. I really picked up some clicks there. And then Indonesia, Great Britain. God, it makes me wonder what people are doing on my website. Anyways, those are the 4 time patterns that are related to time. 4 SQL patterns that are related to time, and I will share these the SQL code that you use to do it yourself. Thanks for sticking around. I hope all these meandering distractions have been interesting, but more than that, I hope you've learned something and you can apply it. So have a great day.